Today we continue on our NHL offseason plan series. Today we look at the 30th ranked team from the regular season, the Anaheim Ducks. What should we expect from them this offseason? Will Pat Verbeek make moves to make this team more competitive and push for playoffs next year? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we're continuing on with our NHL offseason plan series today, looking at the 30th place Anaheim Ducks. So if you're new to this series, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick recap of the past season, the 23-24 season, take a look at some team stats, top performers, take a look at what changed for the team, what moves they made throughout the year, analyze their salary cap situation, contracts that are expiring, looking at who needs to be signed or replaced, and then, of course, take a look at what we should expect from them in the offseason to get ready for next year. Of course, General Manager Pat Verbeek and Head Coach Greg Cronin was in his first year this year. Didn't have an overly great season, but at the same time, they're still growing and rebuilding. So they finished with a record of 27, 50, and 5 for 59 points. Taking a look at some of their key team metrics here, goals for and against were both 30th in the NHL, so they need to improve a lot in that respect. They scored 204 goals while giving up 295. So that's not exactly a great result. Special teams were not very good either. 17.9% on the power play for 25th best, and the PK was second last in the league at 31st with 72.4% success rate. So clearly, like I said, it was a rough season. The Anaheim Ducks were still kind of at that stage where they're still, bottoming out, so to speak. They've had some high picks here in recent years, and they're destined here for another one in the 24 NHL Draft. Now, individually speaking, they did have some good performances. It was a breakout year for Frank Vatrano. It turned out to be a great signing for them. Put up 37 goals and 60 points. There was a lot of talk around him at the deadline that he could be traded because there was lots of interest, but Pat Verbeek chose to hang on to him. We also saw Troy Terry have another 20-goal season, 54-point campaign, although I think Terry is capable of doing a little better than that. Mason McTavish put up 42 points, which was decent considering he did miss a decent amount of time with injury. So he's still climbing and still getting better. McTavish will be a force as he matures and gets stronger here as the years go on, for sure. Ryan Strome as well put up 41 points for them. Not too bad as well with the role he had. John Gibson and Lucas Dostal didn't have the greatest stats goaltending-wise. I mean, Gibson had an average goals against of 3.5, where Dostal was 3.3. Save percentage was .888 for Gibson and .902 for Dostal. So Lucas Dostal kind of, he did outperform Gibson, but it's not like he did it by a long shot here. Long term, though, he should assume the starting role, and Gibson's going to be a player that we look at the future of here later on in this video. Throughout the season, they did make some changes. They did move on from a few players, of course. They made a trade with the Edmonton Oilers, sending Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick for a few draft picks, including a first-rounder in the 24 draft. So obviously that's, obviously encouraging to see them some more draft capital coming in. Of course, they had a huge trade involving Jamie Drysdale, sending him to Philly for Cutter Gauthier. That caught a lot of us by surprise. Gauthier got to sign after coming out of his college season at the end of the year and get into his first NHL game and get his first assist as well. Gauthier is poised to be a huge part of this team's, future for sure. And you take a look at what they've been able to accumulate in young talent, especially in the forward group with McTavish and Leo Carlson, and now adding Gauthier to the mix. Troy Terry still on the younger side of things. You get Zegras. There's quite a core group of young players there that are very talented, and they have a lot to be, happy about moving forward in that respect. They also moved defenseman Ilya Lyubushkin back to the Maple Leafs. Lyubushkin went from the Leafs, ended up, I believe he was in Buffalo, and then traded to Anaheim and then back to Toronto. So they get a third-round pick for Lyubushkin. So that basically summarizes last season. So overall, they did, sell off at the deadline. They picked up a young player who didn't want to be where he was drafted to, and they had some rough results. I actually made it out to California. It was at an Anaheim Ducks game to see the Ducks against the Ottawa Senators back in the spring here, in the later part of the season. So Ducks won that game, certainly put up a good performance, even though they had none of their top young players that I was hoping to see were in the lineup. There was no Karlsson, no McTavish, no Zegras. None of them were in action. So it's unfortunate I didn't get to see a lot of those guys play, but the Ducks certainly played a good game. Cap-wise, they have $32.8 million in available space coming up this offseason, and they have 16 players already under contract. So, obviously you normally carry, anywhere from 21 to 23 players on your NHL roster, so that leaves them with anywhere from 5 to 7 signings to make with $32.5 or $32.8 million. So, and that's assuming we get the cap increase that we're expecting. At this point, we haven't heard otherwise, so we'll go with what we've been already been told here by the NHL back a while back. Let's take a look at their expiring contracts and who was on their restricted and unrestricted free agent list. On the RFAs, we have Isaac Lundestrom, Max Jones, Brett Leeson, Bo Gruel, Jackson Lacombe, Urho Vakanainen, and Gustav Lindstrom. I can see a case where maybe not all, but a good chunk of those players will likely be retained. Some of them are getting close to being UFAs, so they wouldn't have a lot of time left. Some of them have arb rights, so hard to say what Verbeek does with this group of players. There's no big names, but Max Jones has barely been there the longest. Lundestrom's been around a while. Obviously they'll likely be retained, I suspect, but we'll find out later if anybody's not being qualified. But either way, there's nothing there that's really going to break the bank, so to speak. On the UFA side of things, there's not a lot. There's Jacob Silfverberg. We got confirmation from Silfverberg before the end of the campaign that he was going to be retiring from the NHL. He has signed a 2-year contract to play over in Sweden, so he's heading back home after a long run in the NHL. So no surprise there. Silfverberg will not be back. And then Ben Myers and William Lagesson, also UFAs, which I suspect probably won't be retained either. So not a lot internally to really do. Like I said, they have some RFAs, but nothing that's going to cost a ton of money. So they can certainly make their decisions on who's going to be qualified. And like I said, most of them will be cheap. So they'll still have lots of money if they want to make trades or dip into free agency. They will have lots of flexibility to be able to do that. Coming up in the 2024 NHL Draft, which is going to be another huge pivotal moment here in the franchise's rebuilding stage as they gather another top pick. Obviously, they have 2 first-rounders, like I mentioned. They have their own first-round pick, which is going to have the 3rd best odds at first overall. So they're guaranteed to pick top 5 here. So obviously, like I said, with the draft, you're bound to get a real good player. Depending on how they go, obviously, if they were to be lucky enough to win, they could get Macklin Celebrini, or maybe there's one of the top D. There's lots of D at the top of the list here that are quite interesting too. So they're going to get themselves a real good prospect no matter what. It's just a matter of where things land and exactly what direction they go in. But they have 9 picks in total. 2 in the first round, 2 in the second round, and 3 in the third round. So obviously, lots of picks early on. That gives them some options. They may not draft 9 players. They could use some of those picks in other deals. So we'll see. But what are the top questions and needs here for this team? And Pat Verbeek has to address this offseason. Well, first up, we know Pat Verbeek made comments at his end of season media availability that he wants to push for playoffs next year. So I think it's fair to say that the effect we've seen in free agency with him bringing in a few veterans will probably continue, except this time, I don't know if it'll be as much in free agency, but I do think we'll see some trades. I think he has to address goaltending. I think, is John Gibson finally going to be moved? There's been speculation for about 2 years that Gibson's been interested in getting traded out of Anaheim. He's never really pushed it too hard or demanded a trade, but there's been talks, internally with management for like the last 2 off seasons about moving him. It's been proven difficult given his contract and the performance. So I don't know what they'll end up doing with Gibson, but could his time in Anaheim be up? I'd like to think it's a possibility. I think for them to address goaltending, they need to be able to do that. At the very least, maybe Dostal plays even more next year. Hard to say, but I do expect goaltending definitely needs to be addressed. And like I said, will Gibson finally get that trade that we've been talking about for so long? It's just difficult to picture where he would go. Would Pat Verbeek retain money? There's lots of questions on, how a complex transaction like that could all end up playing out. Another player that we need to really examine the future of. And I do seriously wonder if we'll see a trade as Trevor Zegras. Lots of rumors really dating back to last offseason after a contentious negotiation. There's belief that obviously they want Zegras to change his game a lot. And unfortunately, he missed so much time this year with injuries that I don't know if he was really able to demonstrate a lot that he was able to do that. I mean, maybe a little bit, but at the end of the day, he had a really rough season. We saw one of his best friends in Jamie Drysdale get moved to Philly. There's been rampant rumors about him and the Montreal Canadiens, which he has addressed in a recent article in The Athletic, saying how it's impossible not to kind of hear and see those things in the media. And, I do wonder, there's going to be interest. There's been lots of talk that he's been, not necessarily that they're out there shopping him, but that he's available. And if the right deal comes along, if they can get a different kind of player, that they'd be willing to make that move. Like I said, there's been rampant rumors about Montreal reuniting him with Cole Caulfield. So we will see where things go, but the future of Trevor Zegras is definitely something to monitor closely. I do think there's a possibility they could make a real solid hockey trade and bring in another player. If they do, just like they traded Drysdale for Gauthier, could they trade Zegras for, whether it be a top prospect defenseman or, somebody who's, like I said, a different type of player. If Zegras stays in Anaheim, he's probably going to have to be a winger. And I'm not sure that he's, that's best suited for that, you could say. So I really think with the makeup of this team now, that he becomes expendable. And I do seriously think Pat Verbeek will explore that. So Gibson and Zegras are probably the main two players on this roster that I would be looking and, thinking that trades are likely this offseason. Obviously, like I said, they also have some draft currency they can work with. Will the Anaheim Ducks and Pat Verbeek be a little bit more aggressive when it comes to the draft? Will they pick 9 players, or could we see some of those picks, whether it be their second first rounder or combination of that and a second rounder or something, be used to acquire another piece that would be important to them? I mean, Verbeek said he'd like to get a top 6 forward, preferably a right-handed shooting top 6 forward, and then also a top 4 right shot defenseman. Those are his 2 needs. So between moving Zegras and moving some of these picks would probably be your main ways to be able to accomplish that. So it's certainly going to be interesting for sure. Obviously, like I said, the draft is going to be a big time for them to be able to get a top player with their top pick. I don't see that being moved. And then we'll see what else they do. But Verbeek certainly has lots of reason to be busy here. Are they going to dip into free agency, which comes right after the draft? It's possible. Steven Stamkos comes to mind just because of the comments from former teammate Alex Killorn. Killorn said if Stamkos makes it to free agency and does not sign in Tampa, that he's going to be doing everything he can to recruit him. Obviously, if Verbeek and other guys, like other GMs around the league, like Steve Yzerman in Detroit, they really want to bring in a veteran guy. Stamkos will have no shortage of options. I don't know what he would want to do if for some reason it doesn't work out for him in Tampa. I have no reason to think right now that it's likely he's going to go to Anaheim. I'm not saying that it's rumored or likely or anything of those natures. Just thinking of what the comments from Killorn in her article from earlier this year. Obviously, he'd love to have his old teammate join him out there, but at the same time, is that what they want? I mean, he is a right-hand shooting top 6 forward. He does meet all the criteria that Verbeek wants, but he probably would prefer somebody a little bit younger who can kind of grow with this team a little bit as well. So at the end of the day, will free agency be a thing for them? Because they signed Killorn, they signed Strome, they got Fortrano. They've done some damage when it comes to some of these veteran contracts. And I think it's, it's fair to think that it's possible. But I think this time could be more of a combination of trades and free agency, and we'll see here. But when it comes to obviously free agency, I don't think we'll see, barring a crazy move like Stamkos, which I'm not expecting. I would think it's more likely that they'll do smaller deals, and it won't be anything as significant. I think the more likely way that we see them make their team better and really change the roster would be via the trade market. So we will see what happens, but we know what Pat Verbeek wants. He wants a top 4D. He wants a top 6 forward. We know his trade chips, whether it's Zegras, Gibson, some draft selections. They got some other draft picks and prospects that, for either future draft picks or a prospect that they could throw in there as well. They have lots of currency. There's no reason why they can't find some moves. Can they compete for playoffs next year? I don't know. It's going to be tricky. That if you look at the Western and the Eastern Conference standings and the teams that get in this year, you have to think, okay, we're going to get better. We're going to win more games, but how are we going to get past some of these teams? And they have a lot of teams to jump over. So I think they can be more competitive. I think they can definitely win some more games. I think they can be more successful. Playoffs in 1 year from now, probably not likely, but can they push forward, at least be in the conversation longer? I think that's at least the goal, to play more meaningful games down the stretch. So we'll see how the Ducks do. Let me know your expectations around the Anaheim Ducks throughout the course of this offseason down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.